A massive surge of gray mist erupted from the demon eye at Lin Dong's forehead, spreading like an unstoppable tide. In an instant, it blanketed the sky, darkening the heavens as if a storm cloud had formed. The oppressive gray mist spread far and wide, and with it came a desolate, ancient aura that began to seep through the air. Amid the mist, faint roars echoed once more. As this mysterious phenomenon unfolded, powerful figures from all directions began to gather, drawn by the strange occurrence. Soon, figures appeared on the surrounding mountain peaks, though none dared to interfere. They merely watched in shock, their gazes fixed on the ominous sight in the sky. From Lin Dong's forehead, a streak of blood spread rapidly, while waves of sinister energy continually surged, attempting to invade his eyes. However, every time the energy neared, a gentle white light would emerge and block it. The wild demon eye, though immensely powerful, came with a hefty price. If it weren't for the mysterious stone talisman protecting Lin Dong's body, he would never have dared to push the wild demon eye to such extremes. Even though he could still perceive the world through spiritual energy if he went blind, the thought of becoming like a sightless elder was not one he welcomed. The gray clouds in the sky swirled above, and within Lin Dong's demon eye, a sudden flash of blood-red light appeared. In a heartbeat, it shot toward the thick cloud layer above, disappearing into the depths. Boom! The moment the blood-red light surged into the clouds, they began to writhe, forming what seemed to be a massive vortex. From within, an ancient and primordial force seemed to emerge, as if connected to a time long past. The vortex churned violently, and for a moment, it seemed as if a colossal shadow swept across the sky. Playing tricks, but no matter how strange your methods are, you're still just at the 5th nirvana stage. Luo Yi glared coldly at the swirling gray clouds above Lin Dong's head, a sinister glint flickering in his eyes. Despite his dismissive words, unease gnawed at his heart, the oppressive clouds weighing heavily on his mind. Kill this strange brat. Murderous intent flickered across Luo Yi's eyes. Without a moment's hesitation, he gripped his jagged blade tightly, primordial energy erupting violently from within him. The force was so overwhelming that the surrounding air seemed to shudder, causing many nearby figures to pale. The strength of an 8th nirvana stage expert like Luo Yi was truly fearsome, a fact well known among his enemies. He ranked 6th on the sect's wanted list for a reason. Boy, even if you're a disciple of the Tao sect, your life is mine today. Luo Yi's face twisted into a ferocious grin. In the next instant, he took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing with deadly focus. Torrents of blood energy surged behind him, slowly forming a massive, blood-red phantom, tens of meters tall. The phantom held a jagged, blood-stained blade, and its very presence filled the air with a suffocating aura of slaughter. Blood Blade Patriarch. That's Luo Yi's trump card, the Grand Azura Blade. Murmurs of alarm spread through the onlookers, their faces shifting as they recognized the fearsome technique. It was clear that Luo Yi's brutal reputation was well-earned. To think Luo Yi would resort to this technique just to kill someone at the 5th nirvana stage? That boy's in for a rough time. Luo Yi once used this technique to cut down 5 experts at the 7th nirvana stage. Whispers filled the air as the crowd anxiously watched the scene unfold. Even the faces of Ying Huanhuan and Jiang Kuan flickered with concern as they gazed at Lin Dong, shrouded by the gray clouds. Worry clouded their eyes. There's no way Lin Dong can block that attack, Jiang Kuan muttered under his breath, and the others nodded in agreement, their expressions grim. Ying Huanhuan frowned, biting her lip in worry. Her jade-like hand reached out, and a delicate, ancient zither shimmered into view. The elder had entrusted her to lead the mission, and if something happened to Lin Dong here, she wouldn't know how to face the likes of Dust True and Wu Dao from Wild Hall. Grand Azura Blade, Azura Slash. Blood energy surged as Luo Yi's face contorted with rage. He stepped forward, both hands gripping his jagged blade tightly. With a roar, he swung down with the force of a mountain. Boom! The moment his blade descended, the blood-red phantom behind him mirrored his movements, its enormous jagged sword cutting through the air. 100-meter-long crimson light beams streaked across the sky, accompanied by a terrifying roar, as it crashed down toward Lin Dong. The sheer pressure of the attack caused the ground below to crack and split even before the blade touched it. Lin Dong raised his head, the blood-red blade reflected in his eyes, making his hair stand on end. His expression turned solemn as his hands quickly formed seals. Above him, the swirling gray clouds abruptly tore apart, and from within the vortex, a massive shadow emerged at last. The colossal figure that emerged was so large it blotted out the sky. Its terrifying form coiled above, a beast from the ancient wilds, radiating an aura of primal chaos. The appearance of the mysterious beast drew gasps from the crowd. Even the members of the Demon Seal Legion, like Su Lei, felt their faces pale. Is that the legendary wild beast? Ying Huanhuan and the others were equally stunned, their gazes fixed on the enormous creature. Though they had some knowledge of the Wild Hall's martial arts, this was their first time witnessing such an ancient and terrifying beast in the flesh. The wild beast loomed overhead, its enormous eyes tightly shut. Yet, even with its eyes closed, waves of destructive energy rippled through the air. The crowd's fear grew as they sensed the massive eye slowly opening. Boom! As the eye opened, the heavens and earth seemed to boil with primordial energy. At last, the beast's eye fully opened, revealing a black pupil that seemed to contain the most terrifying force imaginable. Whoosh! A beam of black light shot out from the eye, as if it absorbed all the light in the world. The moment the beam was released, the entire area plunged into darkness for a brief instant before it streaked through the sky, smashing directly into the blood-red blade. Bang! The moment of impact was followed by a deafening silence. The clash of energies was like the blossoming of a deadly firework, beautiful yet carrying the aura of death. The shockwave from the collision was so intense that nearby mountain peaks crumbled to dust, and many of the closer onlookers spat blood, their faces pale with terror as they scrambled to retreat. Lin Dong was also forced to retreat as the shockwave swept over him. His heart pounded in his chest, the sheer power of the energy making his skin crawl. With no time to lose, he clenched his fist, causing a wave of blue light to surge forth and form a massive azure scale shield in front of him. Clang! The shockwave smashed into the azure scale shield, and Lin Dong's body shuddered as his blood roiled within. He was thrown backward, his arm going numb from the force. If not for the strength of his physical body, that single strike might have shattered his arm entirely. The terrifying storm in the sky raged for several minutes before it slowly began to dissipate. The once vibrant landscape had been reduced to ruins, with the forest below leveled to the ground. As the chaos subsided, the onlookers finally regained their composure, taking in the extent of the destruction. Many couldn't help but gasp in shock. When they looked again at the young figure in the sky, all traces of mockery in their eyes had vanished. Some glanced at Lin Dong, but soon their eyes shifted to Luo Yi. His long hair had fallen loose, his clothes were tattered, and his breathing was ragged. His face still showed traces of shock. The earlier clash had clearly shaken him, and he struggled to comprehend how Lin Dong, with just the strength of a fifth Nirvana stage cultivator, had managed to stand his ground against him. Are Dao sect disciples really this strong nowadays? He thought, still reeling from the fight. The atmosphere in the sky grew eerily still, and the greed that had flickered in the eyes of many began to fade. Who else wants to make a move? Lin Dong's cold voice suddenly cut through the silence, sharp and dangerous like a wolf prowling the grasslands. Despite the violent surging of blood within his body, his face betrayed no weakness. His voice, laced with a chilling menace, echoed across the sky. Even though many present were ruthless by nature, none dared meet Lin Dong's icy gaze. His earlier display of power had struck fear into their hearts, making even the most vicious among them hesitate. Luo Yi's expression was especially dark, but he remained silent, still reeling from Lin Dong's ferocity. Lin Dong's gaze swept across the sky, cold and ruthless, before he began to retreat. But just as he was about to make his exit, a soft, mocking laugh broke the silence. Heh! When did Dao sect produce such an extraordinary disciple? But scaring others with that fierce act might work on some. Unfortunately, it doesn't have much effect on me, Yao Ling? Lin Dong stopped in his tracks and slowly raised his head. His eyes narrowed as he spotted a black-cloaked figure standing atop a distant mountain peak. His heart sank. Yao Ling, leader of the Demon Seal Legion, ranked 4th on the sect's wanted list. So, he's finally shown up? The figure in black gradually revealed himself, drawing the attention of everyone around. Though his face was obscured by the cloak, a cold, oppressive aura quietly radiated from his body. Yao Ling. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the crowd. The name carried significant weight in Bloodstone territory. His ranking as 4th on the sect's wanted list was enough to make many fear him. Even Luo Yi and Xiao Tian's expressions shifted at the sight of Yao Ling. Their gazes filled with apprehension as they looked at the cloaked figure. Though their rankings were close to his, both knew that if they were to fight him, even together, they wouldn't stand a chance. Looks like even Yao Ling has come out for this. The Demon Seal Legion must be dead set on obtaining that immortal essence ancient seed, Luo Yi sneered coldly. Despite his frustration at Lin Dong's earlier display, a hint of satisfaction gleamed in his eyes as he imagined the trouble Lin Dong would soon face. He couldn't help but feel a pang of bitterness knowing that the immortal essence ancient seed would likely fall into Yao Ling's hands instead of his own. Boss! Su Lei and the other members of the Demon Seal Legion rushed over to Yao Ling with expressions of joy, casting mocking glances at Lin Dong and his companions. Yao Ling, Ying Huanhuan, Yuan Fong, and Jiang Kuan's faces darkened with Yao Ling's appearance. Although they had anticipated his arrival, seeing him in person still sent a chill through their hearts. They were well aware of Yao Ling's terrifying reputation. As a 9th Nirvana stage expert, he could easily crush anyone present. Yao Ling had once been an elder of Yuan's sect, placing him in a league far above the current disciples. In terms of power, there were few within Dao sect who could contend with him. And Yao Ling wasn't alone. His subordinates were also notorious for their viciousness, forming a dangerous group with few equals. The leader of the Demon Seal Legion, Lin Dong's eyes locked onto Yao Ling's figure, his expression tense. The overwhelming sense of danger radiating from the man made Lin Dong's heart grow heavy. While he had not feared facing Luo Yi, the gap between his strength and Yao Ling's 9th Nirvana stage power was far too vast. You're Lin Dong, right? The champion of the 100 Dynasty War this time around. I didn't expect the champion to join Dao sect. Yao Ling's pale, shadowed face peeked out from beneath his black robe, his cold eyes locked on Lin Dong with a faint smile. Lin Dong's expression tightened. He hadn't expected Yao Ling to recognize him so quickly. Yao Ling, the immortal essence ancient seed, was discovered by Dao sect first. We've already sent word back to our sect, and our experts will arrive soon. This isn't something you can claim. Yuan Fang's voice was stern as he spoke. That's fine. I'll just get rid of you all before your Dao sect experts arrive, Yao Ling replied nonchalantly, as if the idea posed no challenge at all. And don't think you can use Dao sect to scare me. Others may fear your sect, but I, Yao Ling, don't care in the slightest. Yuan Fang clenched his fists in anger, but forced himself to calm down. Be arrogant while you can. There will come a time when you regret this. Lin Dong's brow furrowed. The fear and awe he had instilled in the crowd with the wild demon eye was now all but erased by Yao Ling's arrival. Lin Dong, follow my lead. We need to retreat. Ying Huanhuan's voice softly reached Lin Dong's ear. Lin Dong's eyes narrowed, but he nodded silently. Given the current situation, staying any longer was not an option. With Yao Ling here, they no longer held any advantage. Retreat was their only choice. But would Yao Ling allow them to retreat so easily? Lin Dong's gaze flickered, and he sighed inwardly. From atop the distant mountain, Yao Ling extended his hand, slowly pulling back the hood of his black robe, revealing a pale, middle-aged face. His deep-set eyes gleamed with a sharpness that felt like a blade slicing through flesh. Friends, the immortal essence ancient seed is something Yuan's sect has set its sights on. I hope you'll all stand aside today. If you do, Yuan's sect will surely reward you in the future, Yao Ling said, his gaze sweeping across the crowd before he cupped his hands and smiled faintly. As Yao Ling spoke, he made it clear that he was invoking the authority of Yuan's sect, the most powerful sect in the Eastern Mystery region. His words carried an undeniable weight, and as soon as his voice fell, many people's expressions shifted, though none dared to oppose him outright. Whether it was Yao Ling's personal strength or the overwhelming might of Yuan's sect, neither was something they could challenge. Seeing the silence spread across the crowd, Yao Ling's face curved into a smile. He then turned his gaze toward Lin Dong and his group, extending his hand with a cold smile. "Hand over the item. You should know my nature by now. I've never shown mercy and I won't start now. If necessary, I wouldn't mind turning this place into a river of blood." At his words, the pupils of Ying Huanhuan and the others contracted slightly, their expressions flickering. Ying Huanhuan hesitated for a moment, a trace of struggle crossing her face. But just when Yao Ling believed she was about to surrender, her eyes suddenly turned icy, and with a cold shout, she yelled, "Retreat!" Boom! The moment her voice fell, Ying Huanhuan's jade hand swiftly struck the strings of her ancient zither. The strings vibrated furiously, and emerald sound waves rippled out like a tide. Though the sound waves weren't particularly aggressive, they caused a momentary daze in all who heard them. In that instant, the Dao sect disciples below scattered in unison, darting in all directions like locusts. The abruptness of their retreat left everyone stunned. None had expected the 100 disciples to disperse so decisively. By the time many regained their senses, most of the Dao sect disciples had already disappeared into the forest with astonishing speed, leaving many onlookers gaping in shock. "Go!" In midair, Ying Huanhuan, Jiang Kuan, and the other core disciples shot off as well, though they didn't scatter. They knew that while ordinary disciples could retreat easily, they themselves would undoubtedly become the focus of Yao Ling's pursuit. "I'd like to see where you think you can run." Yao Ling finally snapped back to reality, his gaze icy as he watched Ying Huanhuan, Lin Dong, and the others flee. A cruel smile spread across his face. "Follow them. The immortal essence ancient seed is on them," Yao Ling commanded with a wave of his hand, his voice dripping with cold amusement. "Yes." Su Lei and the other members of the Demon Seal Legion responded with cruel smiles before taking off in pursuit of Lin Dong and his group, their figures slicing through the air like wind. Yao Ling's figure also disappeared in a flash, turning into a streak of light as he sped forward. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. With the Demon Seal Legion in pursuit, many of the onlookers also sprang into action. Although Yao Ling had laid claim to the immortal essence ancient seed, few were willing to simply give up on such a treasure. The sound of wind tearing through the air filled the sky, and the primordial energy of heaven and earth seemed to boil in response to the countless figures speeding through the atmosphere. High above the mountain range, several figures were swiftly fleeing, their movements causing the air to ripple with the sound of wind being sliced apart. Every now and then, they glanced back with increasingly heavy expressions. "At this rate, we'll never shake them off," Yuan Fong muttered through gritted teeth. Lin Dong nodded slightly. He could feel Yao Ling's aura growing closer with every passing second. Jiang Kuan and the others remained silent, their faces dark. Being hunted like this was a deeply frustrating experience. Ying Huanhuan, who was clutching her emerald zither, lowered her eyes briefly. After a moment of hesitation, she suddenly stopped in her tracks, biting her lip. "I'll stay behind to hold them off. You all go on ahead." Her words caused Jiang Kuan, Yuan Fong, and the others to pale. They were about to object when Ying Huanhuan glanced at them, her voice much calmer now. "Do any of you have the ability to stop Yao Ling?" The group fell silent. The gap between them and Yao Ling was too vast. Even if they tried to block him with their lives, it was unlikely they'd make much of a difference. "If you think we still have time to argue, then feel free to continue," Ying Huanhuan added coolly. She then turned around and sat cross-legged on a stone, placing the emerald zither on her lap. With a swift motion, she loosened her long, black ponytail, allowing her dark hair to cascade down like a waterfall, gently swaying in the breeze. Watching her slender figure seated on the stone, Jiang Kuan and the others clenched their fists tightly. "Let's go." Lin Dong shot one last, deep look at Ying Huanhuan before turning to leave without a word. Behind him, Jiang Kuan and the others hesitated for a long moment before gritting their teeth and following suit. Lin Dong, take the seed back, Ying Huanhuan whispered softly to herself as she watched them depart. Her delicate fingers gently pressed against the strings of her zither, and a faint red light began to flicker in her clear eyes. On the lush peak, the dense greenery stretched out to the horizon, resembling a vast ocean of green. Ying Huanhuan sat quietly on the stone, her once neatly tied hair now flowing freely down her slender waist. The light breeze stirred her long locks, filling the air with a faint fragrance. Her flawless, delicate hands rested lightly on the emerald zither. After a moment, she slowly lifted her bright eyes, gazing into the distance where the sound of wind carried with it a murderous aura. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The sound of wind tearing through the tranquil forest reached her ears, and soon, several figures appeared in the sky, stopping a short distance from the mountain peak. Heh, the Dao sect disciples are getting bolder these days. Yao Ling appeared, his figure slowly materializing. He gazed at Ying Huanhuan, seated on the peak, and chuckled. If you think I'm the type to show mercy to a beautiful woman, I'm afraid you'll be sorely disappointed. Haha, this girl's quite a beauty. Why don't we take her back with us? One of the Demon Seal Legion members jeered, his eyes shamelessly roaming over Ying Huanhuan's body. The surrounding figures who had followed along laughed boisterously, making no effort to hide their indecent stares. Sule, deal with her. The rest of you, follow me. The immortal essence ancient seed isn't on her, Yao Ling ordered coldly with a wave of his hand. Just as he finished speaking, the girl on the stone, dressed in white and green, let out a soft laugh. Her delicate fingers plucked the strings of her zither, and a strange red light began to flicker in her large, dark eyes. You all think too highly of yourselves. If you want to pass here, you'll have to get through my zither formation first. As Ying Huanhuan's playful laughter faded, her delicate face gradually turned cold, and an overwhelmingly powerful aura surged from within her. The strength of this aura was nearing the 8th nirvana stage. Is that all you've got? Yao Ling sneered as he observed, clearly unimpressed by the display. Ying Huanhuan lowered her eyes, ignoring him. Her slender fingers pressed down on the zither strings, and as her fingertips made contact, crimson blood seeped from her palm, staining the emerald zither a deep blood red. As the zither became soaked in blood, a radiant red light erupted from it, accompanied by a strange wave of energy that quietly rippled through the air. Attack! Something's off with this girl. Yao Ling's pupils shrank as a sense of unease surged in his chest. He immediately shouted out in alarm. Whoosh! Before his command had fully left his mouth, Sule shot forward like an arrow. With a violent surge of primordial energy, his massive fist hurtled toward Ying Huanhuan with explosive force. Formless Bodhi sound. Ying Huanhuan raised her eyes, glancing calmly at Sule as he charged toward her. Then, in a soft voice, she uttered those words. As soon as her voice fell, her slender fingers plucked the blood-red zither strings. Boom! For a brief moment, the world seemed to fall into silence. Then, a crimson beam of light shot out with terrifying speed, colliding head-on with Sule. Bang! A deafening explosion resounded as Sule, an expert of the 8th nirvana stage, was violently thrown back. His figure tumbled through the air, much to the shock of the surrounding onlookers. What an eerie sound! Sule managed to stabilize his body, his face flushed with embarrassment and fear. He had felt something strange during the collision, as if his own power had been reflected back at him. Formless Bodhi sound. Yao Ling's expression grew more serious. His gaze fixated on the girl sitting atop the mountain peak. In a low, grim voice, he said, You've actually mastered the formless Bodhi sound, a technique said to be second only to the 4 great mystical scriptures of Dao sect? Ying Huanhuan smiled faintly, her lips curling as she replied, I'm surprised you know so much about Dao sect's martial arts. I suppose you really are worthy of being an elder of Yuan sect. Little girl, stop trying to act clever. The formless Bodhi sound may be powerful, but if you think you can stop all of us by yourself, you're gravely mistaken. Yao Ling barked coldly. Everyone, attack with me. I want to see how she plans to stop us. At Yao Ling's command, he shot forward, his powerful ninth Nirvana stage aura causing the entire mountain peak to tremble. Ying Huanhuan watched as Yao Ling finally made his move. Her expression turned solemn, and she bit down on her lip, causing a thin trickle of blood to run down the corner of her mouth. Formless Bodhi sound, reflection of all beings. Her soft voice echoed once again, and a flood of blood-red light surged out. Behind her, the light coalesced into a massive blood Bodhi tree, its branches swaying gently as an ethereal melody, as if from the dawn of time, drifted through the air. The strange sound waves spread rapidly, enveloping the entire area. Suddenly, Yao Ling and his men halted in their tracks as the space in front of them began to distort, forming what looked like an invisible mirror. From within this mirror, their own reflections emerged, stepping out into the real world. Swoosh! The mirror rippled as the reflections walked out, much to the horror of the onlookers. These mirrored figures were exact copies, identical in appearance, expression, and even power. The formless Bodhi sound, truly terrifying, Yao Ling muttered as his pupils contracted, staring at the clones standing before him, a perfect replica of himself. He shifted his gaze back to the mountain peak, where Ying Huanhuan sat beneath the towering blood Bodhi tree, the blood at the corner of her mouth stark against her pale complexion. In the sky, several figures darted forward, their movements swift and silent. The tension between them was palpable. These figures were none other than Lin Dong, Jiang Kuan, and the others who had separated from Ying Huanhuan earlier. Whoosh! One of the figures suddenly came to a halt, causing the others to stop as well. They turned to see Jiang Kuan at the rear. "Are we really just going to leave her behind?" Jiang Kuan asked, his voice hoarse as he clenched his fists tightly. Yuan Ling and Yuan Fong remained silent, a look of pain flashing across their faces. "And what do you propose we do?" Lin Dong asked softly. "Are you even a man? How can you just leave her to face Yao Ling alone? She's no match for him. How can we return to the sect and face the others after abandoning her like this?" Jiang Kuan roared, his face contorted with fury. "So, you're suggesting we stay behind, fight alongside her, and end up dead, handing the immortal essence ancient seed to Yao Ling so he can bring it back to Yuan's sect and strengthen their resources?" Lin Dong asked calmly, his gaze fixed on Jiang Kuan. Jiang Kuan froze at Lin Dong's words, his expression faltering. He lowered his head in frustration, his hands gripping his hair tightly. "Jiang Kuan, you can't blame Lin Dong for this," Yuan Fong said quietly. "Let's go. If anything happens to Huanhuan, Yuan's sect will be our sworn enemy," Yuan Ling said, gripping Jiang Kuan's arm. His eyes were also tinged red. Jiang Kuan, still in shock, allowed himself to be pulled forward, following the group without protest. Lin Dong watched them for a moment, a flicker of emotion passing through his usually calm eyes. He sighed softly, then flipped his hand to reveal a small, emerald-green seed. Without hesitation, he tossed it to Yuan Fong. "Lin Dong, you?" Yuan Fong caught the immortal essence ancient seed, her face filled with confusion as she stared at him. "You're right. We can't go back like this and explain what happened." Lin Dong shrugged. He knew just how popular Ying Huanhuan was within Dao sect. If word spread that they had left her behind, even if people understood the situation, their reputations would take a serious hit. "I'm going back to find her. You take the seed and go." Without waiting for a response, Lin Dong turned and walked away, his figure surprisingly carefree. "Lin Dong!" Yuan Fong called after him, her voice cracking. She quickly wiped her eyes before shouting, "Bring her back!" Lin Dong didn't look back, simply raising a hand in acknowledgement as he continued forward. He exhaled deeply, mentally preparing himself for the fight to come. Above the forest, a storm of primordial energy raged, while the haunting melody of Ying Huanhuan's zither echoed through the sky. Boom! Yao Ling's expression darkened as he unleashed a thunderous palm strike, charged with tremendous power, against the figure in front of him. The figure was identical to him in every way, down to the expression on its face. It was as if it had been molded from the same template. Yao Ling's fist crashed into the shadow, sending a torrent of energy through its body. The shadow trembled violently before shattering into nothingness, disappearing without a trace. Yao Ling's eyes scanned the chaos around him after he obliterated his own shadow. The entire sky was in disarray, as every pursuer now faced a shadow of themselves. These shadows seemed to mirror the strength of their counterparts. While they weren't exact equals in power, they were strong enough to pose a serious challenge. Even the martial arts they employed were identical, making them incredibly difficult to deal with. Yao Ling's gaze turned towards the distant peak, where a massive blood Bodhi tree swayed gently. The source of these troublesome shadows was clearly this tree. Beneath it, the girl with the inky black hair, Ying Huanhuan, sat quietly, her delicate hands plucking the blood-stained zither strings. Her face was pale, and the blood at the corner of her lips was stark and noticeable. It was clear to everyone that her condition wasn't good. No wonder they call this one of the strongest techniques of Tao Sect's Heaven Hall, second only to the 4 great mystical scriptures. But with your current strength, how long can you hold out? Yao Ling sneered coldly at the girl. As long as I can stop you, that's enough, Ying Huanhuan replied with a faint smile. Her pale, blood-stained face radiated a sorrowful beauty that was almost shocking in its intensity. Yao Ling's eye twitched. A glimmer of murderous intent flashed through his eyes. You've done well. To think that with the strength of the 7th Nirvana stage, you've managed to hold off all of us. It's something to be proud of, but unfortunately for you, you won't live to see that day. I warned you before. I, Yao Ling, have no compassion for women. With those words, a fierce glint flashed in Yao Ling's eyes, and his body shot forward, transforming into a streak of light. He gathered an enormous hand of primordial energy, which rushed down from the sky, aimed directly at Ying Huanhuan with devastating force. Boom, boom. The massive energy palm whistled downward, crushing the air itself and causing cracks to spread across the mountain peak under its pressure. Yao Ling had unleashed his full power, clearly enraged at how Ying Huanhuan had stalled him earlier. Ying Huanhuan looked up, but the terrifying force descending from the sky immobilized her. Though formless Bodhi sound was powerful, it consumed a massive amount of primordial energy. Her earlier actions had drained her completely, leaving her incapable of further resistance. They've probably reached safety by now, haven't they? Ying Huanhuan smiled faintly, her face showing no trace of fear. She knew very well how important the immortal essence ancient seed was to Tao Sect. The massive energy palm rapidly expanded in her pupils. As it descended, the towering blood Bodhi tree behind her began to crack and eventually shattered into countless particles of light before disappearing into nothingness. Die! Yao Ling's face twisted with cruelty as the massive energy palm enveloped Ying Huanhuan's small figure. As the shadow of the palm closed in, Ying Huanhuan took a deep breath and slowly closed her eyes. Whoosh! But just as her eyes were about to fully close, the sound of rushing wind suddenly pierced the air. A streak of green light shot in from the distance with astonishing speed. In the blink of an eye, the figure grabbed the stunned girl, and at the same moment, green scales surged forth, forming a massive azure scale shield overhead. Boom! The energy palm crashed down, causing the entire mountain to shake violently. Cracks spread across the ground, and the peak itself seemed on the verge of collapse. In the sky, Yao Ling's expression grew darker as he watched the peak crumble. His eyes locked onto the summit, where dust and debris slowly began to settle. Eventually, a battered azure scale shield came into view. Crack! The shield quickly fractured and shattered into countless green fragments. As the shield dissipated, 2 figures beneath it emerged from the dust. Saving the damsel in distress? How cliched! Yao Ling mocked with a sneer as his eyes fell on the young man who had just stood up, holding the now unconscious Ying Huanhuan. A smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. Lin Dong flexed his arm, which had gone numb from the impact. He glanced down at the dazed girl in his arms and smiled helplessly. This girl really knows how to overdo things. Yuan sect people truly are despicable, Lin Dong said as he raised his head to face Yao Ling in the distance. You've still got a sharp tongue, even at a time like this? Yao Ling grinned, though his smile was twisted with malice. Lin Dong chuckled. He glanced around at the others, who were closing in from the sky, and knew they couldn't stay here for long. No matter how many tricks he had up his sleeve, it was impossible to hold off Yao Ling and his group on his own. Buzz. A gray line suddenly appeared between Lin Dong's brows, and in the next moment, the demon eye opened once more. The wild demon eye? Yao Ling frowned as he saw the eye manifest on Lin Dong's forehead. He clearly recognized it. Dao sect's four halls were famous not only for the four great mystical scriptures, but also for their powerful martial arts techniques, such as Ying Huanhuan's formless Bodhi sound and Lin Dong's wild demon eye. Whoosh! A beam of gray light, containing destructive power, shot out from Lin Dong's wild demon eye. Those who had previously witnessed its power immediately retreated, and even Yao Ling took a step back, unwilling to get caught in the blast. Yao Ling, I imagine quite a few people from Dao sect will be looking for you after today. I hope you'll still be smiling when that happens, Lin Dong said with a bright grin, though the coldness in his eyes was unmistakable. Yao Ling's expression turned grim. He understood perfectly well that today's events would provoke Dao sect's wrath. And though he was once part of Yuan sect, he had been expelled. So if Dao sect came for him and he failed to deliver the immortal essence ancient seed, he would be in a very precarious situation. Don't worry. Once I kill you and take back the seed, all of those problems will disappear, Yao Ling replied with a menacing grin. I'm afraid you won't get that chance, Lin Dong shot back, smiling faintly. He flipped his hand, and the heaven crocodile bone spear appeared in his grasp. In his other hand, a large amount of crimson liquid materialized. This was the bloodline essence of the heavenly desolate god bowl that Lin Dong had acquired long ago but had never used. Now, however, it was time. Sizzling, Lin Dong poured the bloodline essence onto the heaven crocodile bone spear, and as his hand seals rapidly shifted, the spear trembled violently. The next moment, a blinding surge of blood-red light erupted, accompanied by an ancient, terrifying roar that echoed through the sky. The overwhelming blood-red light condensed, and under the astonished gazes of Yao Ling and his group, it slowly transformed into a massive ancient, heavenly crocodile. Go! Lin Dong pointed his finger forward, and the ancient heavenly crocodile let out an earth-shaking roar. With thunderous steps, it charged ferociously toward Yao Ling and his men. Having summoned the ancient heavenly crocodile, Lin Dong quickly stowed away the heaven crocodile bone spear, then gently hoisted the unconscious Ying Huanhuan onto his back. Without a moment's hesitation, he turned and bolted away. He knew all too well that, while the spirit of the ancient crocodile was powerful, it couldn't possibly hold its ground against Yao Ling and his group. His sole intention was to use it to buy some time. That bastard! Yao Ling's gaze grew colder as he watched Lin Dong retreat. He roared furiously, "Boy, you won't escape. You're all talk," Lin Dong muttered under his breath, his pace never faltering. As he continued to run, he suddenly heard a faint laugh beside his ear. Glancing to the side, he saw Ying Huanhuan's pale face. She had begun to regain consciousness, her eyes fluttering open. "Let's go. I'll take you back," Lin Dong said softly, his lips tightening with resolve. Ying Huanhuan stared blankly at the determined profile of the young man carrying her. After a moment, Lin Dong heard a barely audible hum of agreement by his ear. In that soft sound, there was a trace of gentleness, difficult to detect but undeniably present.